Sudden blinding light pierced through Reagan's eyelids as her mind violently pulled away from the cold darkness of death. She looked down at her hands, gasping as she realized the heavy wrinkles of age and stress had completely vanished. A digital calendar on the chalkboard clearly displayed the date of her 18th birthday, confirming her impossible reincarnation. Memories of her past life flashed before her eyes, reminding her of how she had been trapped in a loveless marriage of convenience. This time, she vowed silently that she would never let the wealthy elite control her destiny or buy her affection again. A shadow fell over her desk as Dante, the wealthiest heir in the city, stepped forward with his usual cold demeanor. Without saying a word, Dante extended his right hand, revealing a sleek, glowing black credit card between his fingers. He told her to take the card and buy whatever she wanted for her birthday, speaking as if he owned her entire world. In her past life, Reagan had gratefully accepted this card, initiating the chain of debt and obligation that ruined her freedom. With a sudden, swift motion, she slapped his hand away, sending the priceless black card spinning across the linoleum floor. Gasps erupted from the surrounding classmates who couldn't believe anyone would openly insult the most powerful heir in school. Dante's expression instantly froze, his icy blue eyes narrowing as a dangerous silence settled over the room. Reagan stood tall, declaring loudly that his wealth could no longer buy her heart or dictate her choices. She turned away from the billionaire heir and ran out into the hallway, feeling a sudden surge of absolute liberation. At the end of the courtyard stood Callum, her childhood sweetheart, holding a simple bouquet of wild daisies. Reagan threw herself into Callum's arms, tears of pure joy streaming down her face as she embraced true love. She told him that she would choose him over 100 billionaires, confident that their love would conquer all future obstacles. Callum looked slightly overwhelmed by her intense declaration, offering a hesitant but sweet smile in response. Meanwhile, back inside the quiet classroom, Dante slowly knelt down to pick up his rejected black card. His fingers brushed against the cold plastic as he realized his pride had been completely shattered in front of everyone. He slipped the card back into his tailored pocket, vowing that he would never offer his protection to Reagan ever again. Dante walked out of the school building, his expensive leather shoes clicking rhythmically against the polished pavement. Just as he reached the ornate iron gates, a beautiful young woman rushed past him, accidentally dropping her luxury silk scarf. Dante reached out and caught the delicate fabric before it could touch the dusty ground beneath them. The young woman stopped and turned around, revealing the breathtaking and sophisticated features of Harper. Their eyes met in a sudden moment of quiet stillness, a stark contrast to the chaotic rejection that had occurred earlier. Harper thanked him politely, her soft voice instantly soothing the lingering irritation that Dante felt inside. Impressed by her refined manners, Dante pulled the glowing black credit card back out of his pocket. He offered the card to Harper, suggesting she use it to buy a replacement for any trouble he caused. Harper giggled softly, accepting the card with an elegant gesture that showed she was completely accustomed to high society wealth. Unknowingly, the entire timeline fractured right at that moment as Dante's affections shifted permanently away from Reagan. From a distance, Reagan watched them leave while holding Callum's hand, feeling immensely proud of her rebellious choice. She told herself that she had successfully escaped a superficial life, completely unaware of the brutal reality waiting ahead. Later that evening, Callum took her to a cheap local diner to celebrate her 18th birthday with a single small cupcake. Reagan smiled, but her eyes inadvertently noticed the chipped paint on the table and the greasy menus around them. A sudden memory of the five-star luxury restaurants Dante used to book for her flashed painfully in her mind. She quickly shook the thought away, forcing herself to focus entirely on Callum's gentle voice as he sang happy birthday. Suddenly, Reagan's phone vibrated violently inside her pocket, shattering the fragile romantic atmosphere completely. The caller ID showed the city hospital, causing her heart to drop instantly into her stomach. She answered with a trembling voice, only to hear the doctor deliver devastating news about her mother's sudden medical collapse. The doctor coldly informed her that immediate, expensive emergency surgery was required to save her mother's life. Reagan realized with sudden dread that the total cost of the surgery was an astronomical sum she could never hope to afford alone. In her previous life, Dante had quietly paid off all of her mother's medical debts using that exact black credit card. She turned to Callum, desperately asking if he had any savings or could help her raise the emergency funds right away. Callum froze in absolute panic, stammering that he barely had enough money to cover their cheap dinner tonight. Cold sweat rolled down Reagan's neck as she realized her proud declaration of love provided absolutely zero financial protection against tragedy. She stood up frantically, rushing out into the torrential rain that had suddenly begun to pour outside the diner. Stranded on the wet asphalt, she pulled out her phone to text Dante, swallow her pride, and beg for his assistance. A massive red error symbol flashed across her screen, revealing that Dante had already blocked her number completely. Right at that exact second, a sleek luxury Porsche drove past, splashing freezing rainwater directly all over her shivering body. Through the tinted glass of the passing vehicle, Reagan caught a brief, horrifying glimpse of Dante smiling warmly at Harper. The realization that she had willingly thrown away her mother's salvation hit her with the force of a physical blow. She stared into the distance as the luxury car's taillights faded into the dark night, leaving her entirely alone with a broken timeline and an impossible debt. The cold wind of reality bit through Reagan's thin jacket as she stood outside the hospital entrance. She clutched a crumpled medical bill in her hand, the numbers blurring under the flickering neon signs. In her past life, she never even looked at the cost of her mother's private suite. Now, even the basic ward fees were more than she earned in a month at her part-time job. She pushed through the heavy glass doors, the smell of antiseptic filling her lungs. Her mother lay on a thin cot in a shared room, surrounded by the coughs of other patients. Suddenly, a soft voice called her name from the shadows near the window. Callum reached out to take her hand, his expression full of youthful adoration. He handed her a small glass jar filled with meticulously folded, colorful paper stars. He told her that each star represented a prayer for her mother's recovery. Reagan looked at the jar and felt a cold knot tighten in her stomach. In the past, Dante would have simply handed her a check for the best surgeons in the country. She forced a smile, thanking Callum for his thoughtfulness while her mind raced with debt calculations. The following evening, Callum took her to a small local noodle shop for a celebratory date. The air was thick with the smell of cheap oil and the loud chatter of construction workers. Callum excitedly pointed at the menu, mentioning how he had saved up for this special treat. Reagan noticed a stain on the plastic tablecloth and felt a wave of nausea. She remembered the 5-star Michelin dinners she used to attend with Dante. When the bill came, it was only $20, yet she saw Callum's hand tremble as he counted the coins. She realized with a jolt that his entire world was smaller than a single tip she used to leave for valets. Later that week, the hospital administration called her into a small, windowless office. They informed her that her mother would be discharged if the outstanding balance wasn't paid by Friday. She walked out into the hallway, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. As she passed the TV in the waiting lounge, a news report caught her eye. Dante was on the screen, looking sharper and more powerful than she had ever seen him. Standing beside him was Harper, draped in an elegant silk dress that shimmered like water. The reporter mentioned how Dante had gifted his new muse a rare diamond necklace just for fun. Reagan felt a jar of paper stars in her bag, its weight suddenly feeling like a mockery. She tried to call Callum to ask for help, but her phone service had been cut off for non-payment. She sat on the floor of the hallway, burying her face in her knees. Why did her mother have to suffer just because she chose love over money? She realized that love was a luxury she simply couldn't afford in this timeline. A group of wealthy students walked past her, laughing about their upcoming summer trip to Europe. Reagan stood up, her legs shaking as she headed toward the hospital's financial aid desk. She begged the clerk for an extension, but the man didn't even look up from his computer. Callum arrived later that night, bringing her a single, wilted rose from a street vendor. She wanted to scream at him that a rose wouldn't pay for her mother's dialysis. Every moment spent in this pure relationship felt like a step deeper into a dark abyss. She decided she had to see Dante one last time, even if it meant crawling back to him. But as she reached for the handle of the hospital exit, a black car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down, revealing the cold, indifferent eyes of Dante's head of security. He handed her an envelope with a seal she recognized all too well from her past life. Inside was a single note informing her that her mother's debts had been bought by an anonymous corporation. She looked up to ask who sent it, but the car sped away into the fog. The realization hit her that someone was watching her struggle, playing a much larger game than she understood. The lingering sense of being watched slowly faded into the freezing night air, as Reagan stood alone on the dim sidewalk. She looked down at her hands, which were now raw and trembling violently from the bitter autumn wind. The reality of the coming winter meant more overdue notices that she had absolutely no way of paying. By the time the next month rolled around, the stack of bright red medical invoices on her kitchen table had doubled in height. Callum would visit her briefly, but his hands were always filled with useless paper origami stars instead of actual financial solutions. He smiled brightly as if his love alone could magically wipe away the heavy compound interest accumulating on her debts. When the university registrar officially informed her that her scholarship was suspended due to unpaid tuition fees, her heart completely shattered. With no other viable options left on the table, Reagan packed her cheap plastic binders into a trash bag and walked out of the campus forever. She officially dropped out of her dream college, trading her bright academic future for a pair of worn-out rubber work shoes. Her first job began at 5 o'clock in the morning, scrubbing the sticky floors of a frantic local fast food restaurant. Angry customers frequently shouted directly into her face over minor order mistakes, completely oblivious to her internal suffering. Meanwhile, across the very same city, an entirely different kind of destiny was unfolding within a private elite club. Dante sat gracefully on a leather armchair, swirling a glass of expensive vintage wine with effortless precision. Sitting directly opposite him was Harper, whose radiant blonde hair glowed softly under the magnificent crystal chandeliers. During a casual conversation between their prominent families, an incredible hidden truth was suddenly brought to light. It turned out that Harper was not just a random girl from the street, but actually his true prearranged high society fiancé. The random encounter where he handed her the black card had perfectly aligned with their family alliances all along. As the cold winter months dissolved into a scorching summer, the vast chasm between the two lives expanded drastically. Reagan picked up a second job working the graveyard shift as a lonely convenience store cashier. To keep herself awake during the agonizing nights, she endlessly scrolled through local high society gossip blogs on her cracked phone. Her screen constantly displayed flawless photographs of Dante and Harper attending glamorous charity galas together. The floating comment text on the screen praised them as the nation's most perfect, untouchable power couple. Reagan remembered a time in her past life when she was the one walking gracefully by Dante's side in those exact venues. Now, she was absolutely nothing to him but an anonymous stranger who had rudely barked at him on an ordinary street corner. Her relationship with Callum began to deteriorate rapidly under the relentless pressure of their harsh financial reality. Callum complained endlessly that she had become completely cold, materialistic, and utterly obsessed with money. He simply could not comprehend that her mother's life-saving medications required actual cash, not his sentimental ideals. Another full year swept past like a blur of endless double shifts, exhaustion, and recurring stress headaches. At the prestigious state university, a massive grand departure ceremony was being held for the top elite graduates. Dante stood confidently at the main podium, delivering a brilliant valedictorian speech to a crowd of cheering billionaires. Harper watched him proudly from the front row, wearing a breathtaking custom designer cream dress. The high society news announced that the two heirs were officially moving abroad to pursue advanced finance degrees together. Reagan happened to see this specific headline on a discarded newspaper, while wiping down a filthy diner table. The photograph showed them looking radiant, standing directly in front of a private luxury jet parked on the tarmac. The realization that they were physically leaving the country made her feel entirely abandoned in her own timeline. Her own life had become a repetitive, agonizing loop of manual labor, cheap instant noodles, and constant exhaustion. While Dante and Harper were mastering global market algorithms in historic London lecture halls, Reagan was counting copper coins. The dramatic gap between her vivid memories of the past timeline and her grim current reality was driving her completely insane. Callum's promises of a beautiful future together had completely disintegrated into bitter daily arguments about basic survival. As the final year of their advanced degrees neared completion, a sudden massive shift in the elite social circles began to echo across the ocean. Rumors exploded across the internet that Dante and Harper were planning an immediate, monumental return to the city. Reagan's heart nearly stopped when she read an official announcement revealing the imminent date of their massive high society wedding. It was a grand luxury wedding ceremony that was specifically designed to permanently cement their billionaire families together forever. A dangerous, unhinged thought suddenly took root deep within Reagan's shattered, desperate mind. She realized that if she didn't find a way to forcefully stop that ceremony, she would be completely trapped in this nightmare of poverty forever. The relentless ticking of the broken wall clock in Reagan's cramped apartment marked the passage of 4 long, agonizing years. During this time, her childhood sweetheart Callum had completely given up on his grand artistic dreams to work a grueling, low-paying factory shift. Their relationship had deteriorated into nothing more than endless, bitter arguments over unpaid utility bills and past due rent notices. Reagan's hands trembled violently as she looked down at the latest stack of final eviction demands resting on the table. Suddenly, the screen of her cheap, cracked smartphone illuminated with a glamorous breaking news notification that stopped her breath. The dazzling headline boldly announced that the elite billionaire heir Dante had officially returned to the country for his grand wedding. He was marrying Harper, the stunning high society heiress who had perfectly managed his family's massive international assets abroad. Glittering digital comments from envious viewers began floating rapidly across Reagan's vision, praising the couple as a match made in heaven. A comment saying that Harper deserved the legendary black card far more than anyone else pierced Reagan's heart like a rusted dagger. A dangerous, desperate delusion suddenly gripped Reagan's mind as she convinced herself that Dante still secretly loved her. She believed that if she could just see him one last time, he would remember their past timeline and take her back. Ignoring her mother's weak coughs from the other room, Reagan slammed the apartment door shut and rushed down the concrete stairs. She threw herself into her cheap, rusted compact car that struggled loudly to start in the pouring rain. Outside, the gray sky opened up, unleashing a torrential downpour that mirrored the chaotic storm raging in her soul. Reagan slammed her foot down on the accelerator, forcing the ancient vehicle to speed recklessly through the slick streets. Meanwhile, miles away at the Grand Metropolitan Cathedral, a completely different world of ultimate luxury was unfolding. Dante stood before the massive altar, looking incredibly handsome in his tailored black tuxedo and pristine white rose boutonniere. The heavy oak doors swung open, revealing Harper walking gracefully down the aisle in a multi-million-dollar lace gown. Dante's eyes filled with genuine affection and respect as he watched his perfect bride approach him. Out on the slick highway, Reagan was screaming in frustration as she aggressively swerved through dense, slow-moving traffic. She muttered Dante's name over and over like a forbidden mantra, convinced that she could reclaim her stolen destiny. As she neared the intersection near the cathedral, her ancient brakes suddenly gave out completely with a horrific metallic screech. Through the rain-blurred windshield, the blinding headlights of a massive commercial truck suddenly filled her entire field of vision. A deafening crash of tearing metal and shattering glass echoed across the wet asphalt as her vehicle spun violently out of control. At that exact microsecond inside the serene cathedral, Dante gently slid a flawless diamond ring onto Harper's finger. The priest officially pronounced them husband and wife, prompting the elite crowd to erupt into sophisticated applause. Meanwhile, Reagan lay completely motionless on the cold, wet pavement, her consciousness fading as blood mixed with the pooling rainwater. Her final thought before falling into darkness was the agonizing realization that she had thrown away paradise for an illusion. Hours later, Reagan slowly opened her heavy eyelids to the sterile, blinding white ceiling of a charity hospital ward. The space beside her cot was completely empty, with no friends, no family, and no Callum waiting for her survival. A tired, overworked public doctor walked over and callously handed her a clipboard containing her catastrophic medical bills. The grand total displayed on the paper was a massive sum that she could never hope to pay in multiple lifetimes. To make matters worse, a tiny television mounted in the corner of the ward began broadcasting live footage of Dante's wedding reception. The screen showed Dante and Harper smiling radiantly as they raised crystal glasses of champagne amidst high society elites. Across the television screen, a massive wave of glowing internet comments praised Dante for choosing a true queen over his past flings. Reagan stared at the screen in absolute silence, finally accepting that she had become nothing more than an unremembered stranger to the luxurious life she had so foolishly thrown away.